Hello and welcome to the Film Angle. I'm Alex.
And I'm Kris.
And today we've got an interesting couple of films to talk about today. We were kind of trying to figure out what was the best film, because we like to do like a new release and then like a BFI film at the moment. That seems to be the way. Not a load of new releases that A, we want to see, and B, there just aren't that many new releases. Like, I don't know.
Well,
It's a bit of a quiet patch, isn't it?
certainly this side of the pond. I know, like in the US, they've got releases like movies like Bottoms that I'm really excited to see, and I'm like, I can't even see a release date. Like, I can't see a time in any of our local cinemas so far. So I'm chomping at the bit, just keeping my eye out for films like that to come about. But yeah,
well, I heard with Bottoms that it might just be coming to Prime streaming over here. Might not get a cinema release. It might just get, because it's Amazon have picked up the rights or distribution rights or something, I think.
Sure. Okay.
So, yeah, I'd love to have seen it in the cinema, but
yeah. It's one of those like communal sort of feeling films. I like seeing comedies in the cinema, and it feels like now we only have to go and see the big budget epics in the cinema, and that's what you should really reserve your time for. But and comedy is usually what is kind of feeling at the box office lately. People don't really seem to turn up for these types of films anymore, but maybe we're just not getting as many good comedies as we used to. But there have been a few gems. We did talk last week about No Hard Feelings, and we both really enjoyed that.
That's true, but again, we may be part of the problem because we both didn't see it in the cinema. So
yeah, exactly. But I did go support Theatre Camp, and that's a similar sort of.
Yeah, that was kind of a very quiet under the radar film. I don't even think it's in the cinemas anymore. It just had its kind of like week, and that was it.
Yeah, it's a shame. That seems to be the trend at the minute. But yeah, we got these Disney re-releases at the minute. People are going to turn up to see. But I don't know. It's weird for me to drive like 35 minutes to go see a 70-minute Disney film that I've already seen a million times, even though it would look probably very nice projected on the big screen. I just don't know if I get a few glares.
Yeah, fair enough. I saw my local is re-releasing The Lord of the Rings, but they're doing the extended editions in 4K,
Sure.
which I imagine would be quite glorious. But yeah,
don't they do that like every week, and every cinema is always Lord of the Rings is on, and people
sometimes,
still
but
turn
they
up
don't
for it.
always. They don't always do the extended editions.
Yeah.
And so when I was younger, I did see The Two Towers and Return of the King in the cinema, but I never saw Fellowship of the Ring in the cinema. So I want to do it, but then I also looked at the running time, and it's like 4 hours. So
Return of the King's like 4 hours 17 minutes or something like that. It's like that's a long time to be sitting down in a seat.
I mean, I've seen the extended editions, but it's kind of a case of like, do I want to see them again?
Yeah.
Yes. Do I want to see them in the cinema? Yes. Do I want to take a bunch of my spare time to do it? No. But there you go.
Are you pro extended editions, or do you just like the theatrical cut?
Yeah, I think I'm pro extended editions, but I don't think I'd make them the default every single time. It depends. If I want to do a Lord of the Rings rewatch and I just want to watch the films, then I'll go for theatrical cut. But if I'm desperate just to be in that world for an extreme amount of time, then I'll watch the extended.
Yeah, it's for all the extra. Well, it's for all the extra nerdy little bits that maybe you enjoy from the book. My memory, I've seen all of the extended editions, but my feeling on them is that they kind of got in the way of the kind of the being swept up in the emotion of it, and got a little bit too down in the details. Sometimes they were like, there was never anything that they thematically added to the film. They just kept you in the seat for longer. But I guess if you're a fan of the book and you just want more, that's absolutely fine. But maybe as a film fan, you might struggle a little bit more. But
is it like a pacing thing for you?
It's a pacing thing, and it's really like usually things like, it's an extra scene of Legolas talking to the hobbits about like a particular type of meal or something. It's very lore. It's usually very lore based, and usually just feels a little bit janky, out of place, especially if you're just used to the theatrical versions. It'll just seem a little bit strange. But
from what I remember, and it's been a long time, I think the only one where I was like, oh, there's a lot more cool stuff going on here was Two Towers.
Which is my
they got like extended action. They got like I think
Yeah, it might be like the Battle of Helm's Deep, but they add every scene almost gets like a little bit of a fluctuation, if you will.
Yeah, it's been a
But
while.
yeah, this is the J.R.R. Tolkien podcast. Well, I've seen Lord of the Rings so many times. We went to actually watch re-releases of it in IMAX last year. All three of them. We did actually 3 days in a row.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, they were
Yes.
working nights as well. I was pretty tired, but it was definitely worth. Like those movies with the big IMAX sound, like they're pretty cool. They are really, really good to see.
Yes, I forgot you did that. You might have even. I think you spoke about it on here actually, if I remember.
Yeah, I believe I did. So yeah.
We're just repeating stuff now. Well, maybe one day we'll have to do a full blown, just I don't know, DVD commentary or something. I don't know. Yeah. I do love watching those films. Just every now and then, just getting back into that world is great. But yeah, the two films we're talking about today, we are, like I said, we were struggling to think of something to watch, but then we realized a new Paul Schrader film had recently, or somewhat recently, come out. And I think it was maybe our third or fourth episode of this podcast was The Card Counter. So we had to kind of, at some point, catch up with his follow-up film. And yeah, so we're going to be talking about The Master Gardener. And then we're going to go into our kind of next blind spot on the BFI Sight and Sound list. And this time we are heading out to Senegal. And we watched Touki Bouki. Not in Senegal. That made it sound like we went to Senegal. But yeah.
No.
Senegalese film Touki Bouki, which is the second Senegalese film on the list. Because we obviously watched...
Black Girl, yeah.
Black Girl, that's it. Can't remember the name then.
I'm surprised, we're talking about Master Gardener now, and I'm really surprised that it took us so long to jump on this film. Because we were such big fans of First Reformed, and we really, I think I remember we both really liked The Card Counter as well. So, and obviously this is like the capping end to the Man Alone in a Room trilogy that he's kind of created. Yeah, it really is that, and all three of those movies heavily include that as a theme.
Lots of narration, lots of like sitting at your desk writing in your diary.
Exactly. Yeah, yes. a lot of internalizing, a lot of dealing with the sort of history that, or the phantoms or the ghosts of our past, and how they kind of rear their ugly head in the present. So yeah, this kind of follows the same sort of thread as those other two movies did. I would say, before getting into it, I will stress that I don't think that this is as successful as both of those films.
No.
Although I did really like it, but we'll discuss that furthermore. The plot centers around a horticulturist played by Joel Edgerton, who is sort of devoted to tending to the gardens of a wealthy estate owner. He's Sigourney Weaver, who I was actually surprised I didn't know she was in this film. He has sort of created a meticulous and organized sanctuary for himself where he can sort of channel the crimes of his past into something more peaceful and humbling. His life, and more importantly, his past, begins to unravel on the arrival of the owner's great niece, Maya, who is played by Quintessa Swindle, which unearths the secrets of his grim past and then threatens to destroy his sort of peaceful sanctuary.
Yes. Can we just say that his character's name is Narvel?
Narvel. Well, yeah, it's a strange choice, and I think
such a strange choice.
When the great niece Maya arrives onto the sort of manor, she says that it's a strange name. She points that out as well. So I'm glad somebody said
it. Yeah, it is a very strange name, but potentially not his real one, because that's, as we kind of delve deeper into the film, we realize that this is not kind of, in a way, his first life. His first life, he was a Nazi, almost like a hitman, almost.
Yeah, he was a neo-Nazi. Yeah,
a neo-Nazi hitman, gunman, whatever you call them, which makes it kind of Schrader's, I imagine, most difficult character to kind of empathize and attempt to maybe redeem, but I think Schrader kind of leaves that up to you as well. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. This was, in a similar vein to his previous works, but just I don't think felt as polished. And for me, it fell more in the kind of script region. I know his kind of films play out in a kind of stilted way, and that's just part of the kind of atmosphere and vibe that he's trying to develop. But I did find that I don't know. I never fully settled into I did settle into the rhythm, but it took me a lot longer than usual. Like First Reformed, I was in. Card Counter took me like a few minutes, and here I was like, I'm not really vibing with this style this time around. I'm not 100% sure why that was. I also wanted to touch on, I just feel like this film just kind of like, I felt this with Card Counter as well, just kind of came out, and then like it's kind of on your radar, but not really.
Sure.
And I feel like Schrader at the moment, that I don't know who produced this film, but felt like these last two films of his just kind of, they were like, oh, there's a new Schrader film out.
Yeah, it's strange. I think he must know that he'll never be commercial in the traditional, respect. But I think he knows that there are enough people out there that love cinema that know the name Paul Schrader. Whenever a Paul Schrader movie comes out, they'll just seek it, and all he has to do is, turn up to a couple of podcasts and ring the bell a little bit. But yes, you're right. It comes up on streaming services, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot that movie was coming out. And yeah, I mean, and you sit on it for a while because you don't really have apart from the poster, you don't really have an idea of the plot or the story. All you just know is kind of thematically linked to the past two. So yeah, I think that's probably why we're a little bit late to the party here. I would say that I was kind of in the zone of this film pretty early on. I think it does a really good job of letting you into that sanctuary and letting, the character kind of Joel Edgerton plays. You feel very sort of interested in him, and I think that's because of his performance. I think that he has this sort of like Arthur Morgan Red Dead Redemption quality to him. There's a sort of like there's a bit of a guy who's kind of found peace and really knows his craft, but there's also something, even without it being mentioned about his past, you still feel like this guy like has some tricks up his sleeve. This guy has a little bit of like, he could pull out, a knife and beat 10 people in a fight right now if he had to. There's something capable about him, which I think is a really hard thing to pull off, because I think it's probably the most difficult of the three roles that Schrader has put in his trilogy. I think he sort of inherently lacks the depth that the other two protagonists did in the previous films, and I think that kind of comes a little bit as a weakness, as opposed to he was neo-Nazi, now he's good, and there's not really much explored in the middle. And I think that kind of was where the movie let me down. I agree with you that the script was probably the biggest culprit in this. I know that stilted is kind of a thing in his films, but this one felt extra stilted. All the characters kind of seemed to feel like they belonged in a different scene sometimes. I think the Sigourney Weaver character, Grace, who owns the Grace Meadows, is where they all work. I think she is, well, a really good actress, and I really am a big fan of her as an actor. I think that the performance and the character is just kind of overdrawn and a little bit cartoony at times, a little bit like it belonged in a melodrama.
I know what you mean. I did love Sigourney Weaver in this, but I think her character is such a kind of, she just says it bluntly, which kind of meant that she did have some kind of real stinker lines, I thought, at times. I mean, she pulls it off because she's Sigourney Weaver, but definitely, I think it's difficult as well nowadays. Like, and I do love Paul Schrader and like the stuff he's brought to cinema, his collaborations with Scorsese.
Very
he's made some brilliant films. First Reform being my favorite, but then he's also made some like really schlocky ones as well. But I think like nowadays he has become a bit of a internet joke because of his Facebook profile, and I think we probably mentioned this on our Card Counter podcast episode, but it does at times feel like old man shouting at things like sure. Hey boomer, that kind of stuff. And I think there were elements of this film where I couldn't separate the jokey Facebook Paul Schrader from the guy who wrote the script. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it was. Like I'm with you. I did enjoy this film for the most part. I just didn't love it, and I just don't think it swept me in enough. And I think it is a really difficult topic because can you redeem somebody like himself? And the film definitely leans on you wanting to, but like you said, that middle road is not explored. We see some horrible things from his past, but then potentially he works for the government and like kills his previous Nazi comrades. I'm not really sure, you know.
Yeah, yeah, he's a little bit of a snitch or something, you know, and yeah, he kind of yeah, that isn't fully explored. It's hinted at through conversations that he has with his house was no, it's witness protection program officer. He's
Yes,
S.A. Morales, who we all enjoyed in well, semi enjoyed in Mission Impossible:
I
Dead
did
Reckoning.
say I was like, is that the Mission Impossible guy? He was good in this though.
Yeah, he was very good in this too. He wears a goofy hat one scene. I don't know what that's about, but
Yeah, well, I
it's,
think because
it's
wasn't he? There were like three guys come to like I don't know, ask him to snitch, and aren't they wearing like red, white, and blue? So I thought it was like very, that kind of on the nose. America's coming, baby. America's here to get you.
yeah, I think that's a big theme in Schrader's films that he does like to tie it towards like themes, but his politics can be a little bit skewed sometimes. I felt, especially here, that it didn't really feel like he had a grasp on what side of the fence that he sat on. You know, it's quite interesting sometimes, but um, I do quite like what I would say is a positive about Master Gardener. That is a positive of both his previous films is that transcendental style that he sort of coined the phrase for. He wrote a book on it actually, which is this sort of whether that's like the locations where everything is very like stripped back. You know, you notice by all three of these films, whenever they go out for a meal or they, you know, everything is stripped back. There's no decorations on the wall. There's no frills or anything. And these rooms that they sit in where they write their journals, there's nothing but a lamp and a light. And it's all to sort of just focus in on character. I think the stilted dialogue is semi a choice.
Yes.
It is, you know, because it really allows you to objectively look at characters and they don't think in emotive ways. Like the actor doesn't respond to the material speaks for itself, and that's kind of what he tries to go for. But it just didn't feel right here. It felt like the stilted dialogue was filled with mistakes. It felt like there were errors, and there was a script here that was maybe on its first draft that needed just a little bit more rounding and a little bit more digging deep underneath the surface. I think he tries to go for the theme here that he did with the previous two, with women. Women are angels, and they are the beacon of light for lost men. I think there's a
Yes.
sort of, you know, that sort of biblical sort of symmetry that he tries to, you know, attach to like characters or historical figures like Mary, and implement them into the story. But here it didn't really work. Maya obviously being the sort of angelic figure this time around, being the savior for Narvel. And I can't, it's hard to say that with that name of a straight face. So I think there's a scene here. Obviously, he hides his body that is covered with these neo-Nazi tattoos. He's got swastikas, he's got SS, you know, insignia all over his body, and he keeps this on his body, which is quite an interesting choice. He doesn't have them removed because it's sort of like a reminder to himself, like a
Mhm.
self-humbling, which I thought was quite an interesting choice and made sense for that character. But whenever Maya obviously discovers this, and they're already sort of romantically involved before this revelation that she sees his body, obviously there's a big fallout of that. And obviously it transpires that Maya is dual heritage as well. So her father was black and her mother was white. So there's this sort of conflict, obviously, that is inherent whenever this revelation is made. But it sort of tries to intercut this moment later whenever they do make love, both of them later in a hotel room, which is a little bit. The whole thing felt a little bit icky and
Yes,
not
there's an age gap
genuinely
as
earned.
well, which is a bit
The age
like
gap is severe. She's 20.
yes,
Yeah, and he's probably, you know, late 40s, I'd imagine. This
yes,
character is. There's this age gap, And also, it just seems a little bit tone deaf and not earned. I understand that he's going for this really, really big broad stroke with the, the baptism sort of thing, where they're both these sort of opposites are kind of meeting, and there's a purification going on here for the both of them, and it's sort of saving him. But it just felt wrong, and and it's intercut with the scene afterwards, which, while beautiful, them going through this road and these and flowers, like almost like in the cartoon, seem to be like sprouting out of the night sky, and these beautiful trees uplifting, and they seem to be in this sort of phantasmic realm for a moment. It just felt really, it made it seem even worse. It just made it seem like it was completely tone deaf and not what the audience was kind of getting from the moment. And it's a shame, because if he explored this another way, or maybe went into his past a little bit more in depth, that might have felt a little bit different here. But here it just came across as like you said, somebody who might be a little bit out of touch. I think the introduction to Maya early on in the story, when she comes, she literally arrives onto the gardens with a t-shirt that says "No bad vibes." Like, it just seems a little bit on the nose, and it reminded me of the card counter, where Oscar Isaac's character is being shown like a mobile phone, how it works. It's like, this guy is like a top poker player in like his late 30s. Like, this guy knows exactly how to work like Skype. It's
that scene happens as well in by next to a motel pool, which is a scene which we have in this film as well, a dialogue scene between two people next to a motel pool. It just reminded me of that. But I guess that leans into the transcendental nature and stuff. But I get what you mean, and I think as well there is an element of like the on the nose nature, even going to that plot point of like a neo-Nazi falls in love with a black woman, like, and vice versa. And I think like I think Schrader, I think there's an element of him really wanting to not put all the cards on the table. He wants you to kind of make the decision of like, is this okay? He doesn't want to write it out for you. He doesn't want to give you the answers. I'm perfectly fine with that. But you're right. I think I didn't mind it, but I can see a lot of people being turned away. Number one, from the fact that Narvel, just from his past, would be completely irredeemable to most. And I think in real life, I think probably irredeemable. In the context of the film, you kind of lean towards redemption. But yeah, it becomes even more complicated when Maya gets involved, and kind of her reaction to it, which is a very honest reaction. But yeah,
I think it's
I would have run from the hills if I was her. But she stays around.
Yeah, I think it's almost a little bit of a trick that Schrader employs to literally give you about 30 to 40 minutes of getting to like the character before any real juicy history is kind of revealed. If that was done the other way, I wonder how we would feel about Narvel as a character.
If you hadn't seen a trailer, or if you didn't know the general description that's going in, I thought he was a hitman, because I remember seeing the trailer a long time ago. So I was just like, oh, he's an ex-hitman, or he's a current hitman. I thought potentially he was working for Sigourney Weaver as a hitman and a gardener.
Right.
But then obviously the Nazi stuff comes in, and that took me off. Took me by surprise. But if you didn't know anything, I think then I think you would come to be like, Narvel's such a nice guy.
And I think that's what the entertainment value, the enjoyable part of the movie, is the serenity of watching him be so knowledgeable about flowers and how to work a garden, and just teaching Maya, going for the apprenticeship, and that stuff is like really he really sells the how something like that can save you. It's almost like it's a rebirth in itself. It seems like it's a really on the nose metaphor.
Yes.
But how flowers can be like a sort of redemption sort of tool. But those scenes are really, really enjoyable. I would have actually liked it if the movie stayed in the Grace Meadows for longer. I love that portion of the film, and it's kind of when, just before halfway, we leave, and both our characters are kind of fired for being in love. So that's when the movie kind of took a downturn for me. I will say what I love about this is the score. I think the score is really, really good. There's really good like deep synths in here that really like convey that transcendental mood and theme. And there's some, he's very, very good at using music. And I think that, even just some of the shots of going through the meadows and hearing the music is very, very, it's very mood setting and it's very peaceful and also sinister. It's something he's really, really good at.
Yeah, I do have disagree about that second half of the film being the worst half. I preferred it because I liked the first half and I think it sets it up nicely. But I think the most kind of stilted nature and kind of obscure scenes happen within the meadows. And I think taking those characters out of that space, which is especially for Marvel, is a comfort. And seeing how they react in a different world outside of what feels at times like a kind of like dreamscape garden.
It's a utopia sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it is in a way for Marvel. So I liked seeing these characters get taken out of their ordinary places and kind of put back into the real world. And I think me not loving it does come from what we've said before. Like, it's very on the nose. It's a bit too on the nose at times, but it is still very well done, and that's why I can't say I didn't like it, because I did still really enjoy it.
The thing is, it's two-dimensional. How did you feel when you finished First Reformed for the first time? What was your initial reaction?
I think my reaction to First Reformed was completely different. It was this kind of it took my breath away in a way. And it was really kind of powerful and sad all at the same time, I think.
Yeah, I felt like emotionally kind of overwhelmed by the experience.
Yes.
And I can't say that this experience I felt any emotion, I felt like I watched it, I followed it along, I was connected to a point but disjointed by the awkward dialogue and some of the weird choices that Schrader employs, but I never felt very dramatically invested in these characters. That's the problem. But I also think that he has much more to say on religion, maybe, than neo-Nazism, I think, at the end of the day.
Yes. Well, he is... he's been in and out of Christianity. I believe he is a Christian reborn again or something like that. So, yeah, he's that's always been a big thing for him. And it's interesting that here kind of religion doesn't play a massive part. But I guess, First Reformed, oh man, I bloody love First Reformed.
Yeah, Ethan Hawke didn't even get nominated that year. I mean, I will still die on the hill and say that guy should have won the Oscar that year. I think that is a career-defining performance. It just seems like a complete one of the best collaborations between director and actor. I felt like both of them were just channeling exactly the same thing. And I think Joel does his really darn best here, and he is. And despite what we learned about him, the first portion of the film, he is investable, or he is likable in that role, and he commands the area that he walks in, and there is depth to there. But it's the material ultimately that does him a disservice, I think. But it's not a minor work of Paul Schrader. It's still a solid film that if you enjoyed the trilogy, definitely cap it off of here. It's definitely worth a watch. And I know a lot of people really, really like this. A lot of people, it's surprisingly some people's favorite of the trilogy, which I do disagree with quite a lot. But for horticulturalists out there, you might really enjoy this.
yeah, definitely. Man, I must say though, I'm happy Schrader's still working, because he's an older guy now, but he definitely
he's switched on.
He gets the actors, doesn't he? He's still a big hitter when it comes to people want to work with him. So yeah, Joel Edgerton, Sigourney Weaver here, and then obviously Ethan Hawke, Oscar Isaac, and Green Goblin. Can't believe it. It's too hot. We're in the middle of a heat wave. I'm sat in my boxes right now. I can't remember Willem Dafoe's name. Jesus.
The legendary Willem Dafoe.
Oh, God.
Were you going to say James Franco?
Is James Franco in one of these?
No, you're going to say Green Goblin. That's how.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Sorry. See, I'm sweating so much I'm forgetting my Spider-Man bloody
should
trivia.
I let listeners know? Well, I'm going to tell them anyway that you're topless right now.
I'm more than topless, man. I'm sat in my pants.
I am having a serious conversation about flowers and neo-Nazism to a guy who is naked.
It's 29 degrees here, and obviously,
It is
because I'm
really,
right
really hot.
next to a main road, for audio purposes, I have to shut my window.
Oh my god! But it's probably better though too, because the sunlight coming in, you need to block that from heating
Well,
up. Yeah.
it's not sunny though on this side, so yeah, I would prefer some breeze, but there you go.
So yeah, I would recommend Master Gardener.
Yeah,
I would ultimately recommend it. I think it's
same.
worth watching. I think your mileage may vary. But for me, I was a little bit disjointed and I felt a little bit disconnected from the experience periodically. And I think that happened more as the movie went on.
Yeah, yeah. I think if you're a Schrader fan and if you just want to carry on watching what he's got to offer, definitely check it out. But if not, just a soft recommend from me, I think. A soft recommend.
So on to number, I think, 67 on the BFI Sight and Sound list now. Are we there? Yeah.
Yes, yes. According to the letterbox numbers.
Yes, according to Letterboxd. But it's hard though, because when I do it on the app on the phone, I literally have to kind of count them manually because it doesn't have little numbers above them on the ranking. Maybe I
Oh,
have.
does
Is
it
that
not?
something wrong today?
Is that the same for me? I don't know. You've got
I
an
don't know.
iPhone. I've
I
got an
always
Android.
random. I
I
just
feel like
count
I
them.
haven't hit upon that, but I know that the official list, the BFI list, has so there'll be like joint numbers on there. So there'll be like
Yeah,
5 or 6 films that are all at like 75 or something like that.
because it's a
Um,
voting system. Yeah.
yeah, but yes. So yeah, we're on to our next blind spot here. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier, our second Senegalese film, and probably my second Senegalese film that I've ever seen. I've not ventured too much into African cinema. Just one of those kind of I don't know, blind spots for me overall.
Yeah, you're
I
in good
prob
company.
Probably not a lot of cinema that is widely accessible either to us over here in the UK. Touki Bouki, which we're about to talk about now, was kind of restored by Martin Scorsese in his kind of International Film Foundation. Can't remember if it's
Mhm.
actually called
Yeah,
that or
back
not.
in 2008, I think. Yeah.
Something like that. So yeah, I mean, good old Scorsese is always rescuing films for kind of cultural heritage, and yeah, this is one of them, and you can see why he made an effort to do so. I would say.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying that its presence, as a type of film, in Africa as a continent, African cinema, its presence isn't overly prominent in the West, and that it's also the continent that has had the shortest lifespan in the industry. So this was, sort of a really great opportunity to see how a low budget African homegrown film from the 70s would have looked like. We had to look at what a Senegalese film from the 60s looked like, and this is a really interesting time period when we're coming off of Senegal being a French colony, and 1960 it turned back into its independence, and both of these films are real sort of contemplations on that transition of power. Like a lot of films on this BFI list are a lot about like countries on a transitional period, and I think this film is another example of that. Yeah, obviously Touki Bouki, which translates to The Way of the Hyena, is written and directed by Djibril Diop Mambéty, and is obviously a French speaking language country during the time. I think it still is mostly. I think they still teach kids in school French. I think it's
Yeah,
is a principal language. So the story follows Maury, who is a cowherd who drives a motorcycle that sports a bull skull fixed to the handlebars, and also Anta, who is a progressive uni student. So the two of them meet in the city of Dakar after being disillusioned by their lives in Senegal and dream of running away to Paris together, where the people supposedly live elegant and much less violent lives. So this results with the two of them getting involved in schemes in order to raise the money to sail to France. So, and that's kind of the story. It's an 80-minute film, kind of filled with lots of like jarring. And well, I think initially it's very jarring. You texted me the other night because you saw it before me and pre-warned me. Previously on the show where we talked about BFI films, I have been kind of affected by the treatment of animals, and this is probably the most hardcore in that respect.
Yes, yeah, I agree. Obviously, we start the film with kind of Maury herding some cattle in a very kind of idyllic looking setting, and then we cut to where those cattle are going, which is the slaughterhouse, the abattoir, essentially. And then we basically watch at least one or two of the cows being slaughtered, and it's not fake. Like it's not fake, and it's very jarring, and it's quite a difficult watch. Now, I don't know about you, Chris, but obviously we discussed kind of death of and treatment of animals on our episode the other week about Andrei Rublev. But here for me, and I must say first of all that I'm very happy that we're not in a place where we do this on cinema anymore. But in the context of the era and the country, we are just kind of, they're not being slaughtered for no reason. We are just watching a slaughterhouse like you might see in a documentary. They're not being slaughtered unnecessarily. So like there's an element of like, it's more difficult to watch because it's more visual and visceral, but like you don't feel as bad as say if they were just being killed for the purpose of the film itself. I don't know. Did you feel in a similar way? Like you didn't feel as disgusting as like maybe when you watch Andrei Rublev, you're like, oh god, for my entertainment, this horse has been killed. Whereas here it was kind of like I'm almost watching a documentary right now, as horrible as it is.
I think you're just not expecting it, and I think it's the shock of that initial scene being kind of idyllic, as you said, and has this really interesting sort of music in the background, and it's just a really colorful and quite cool way to start a movie, and then transitions into this, and you literally have no warning. My eyes literally did widen at that moment, and and I was eating as well.
Oh no, dude! I warned you. I warned you.
I forgot. I
didn't want to say how bad it was because I didn't want to like ruin. Because I think the film is intentionally jarring in that aspect, and it is that 100%. Kind of juxtaposition of like the traditional African world and this kind of new modern kind of way of life, and just how violent that can be.
But
sorry, man, you were eating.
It's okay. You did warn me, to be fair. But I can understand why people would watch that and be like, "Nope, I'm out," and that's kind of that's fine. I get
Absolutely.
that. It is deeply upsetting, and that is usually not my cup of tea, as you well know, Alex. But then I thought of it like this, and I agree with you. I think if the construct of this film didn't exist, would what we've seen on screen have happened anyway? And you're right, it would. Probably yes, definitely. In fact, and then it speaks volumes to the film that ultimately it won me over by the time that we get to the end, and I then, in fact, started to understand that there was a significance to those uncomfortable scenes, like you said. There, later on we get the murder of a goat, which is also pretty brutal. It's about 15 minutes into the film where its neck gets slit on camera, and it's juxtaposed with a scene, a really, really kind of beautiful scene between our two main protagonists that they share. But it's spelling doom for these people. And it's really interesting. And it seems like Mambéty seems to have a real sort of conflict with his country. Reading up online, he's somebody, he never left Senegal, but he really, he feels conflicted. He feels like he might have became something else. He maybe might have been bigger in the film world. He might have been a bit more of a household name if he had taken that journey. And that's really kind of reflected in these characters. Yeah, and it seems like Mambéty seems to try and use the environment both in its beauty and cruelty to really represent what our two main characters are going through. The brutal slaughter of the animals, I felt kind of mirrored the struggles also of the food chain in Senegal and what these young people have to face in society. But on the flip side, one of the most memorable and beautifully shot scenes, as I just mentioned there, is the love scene of them two that they share on the cliff. It's interwoven throughout the scenes with the goat, but we get glimpses of Anta's hand grasping the handles of Maury's motorbike while the ocean is out of focus and sparkles seemingly in the background. Not only is that like image sort of like evoking their first commitment and leap into eloping from Senegal and going towards Paris, but without ever getting too graphic or pornographic, he manages to make the environment around these characters kind of feel erotic, which is kind of a powerful thing. You know, it's a powerful tool, like without showing too much skin, how you can evoke that feeling through atmosphere. And I feel that was really kind of quite caught me off guard, actually. And it's kind of one of the scenes that really stuck with me, hours after watching the film. Is how memorable visually that was. I think he really knows how to use color, and that's something that really jumped out to me. I think it's worth saying that from my knowledge of what I've read about African cinema, obviously we've only really watched a couple of films, and that's regretfully, from our own sort of self-ignorance. But traditionally, African film was more linear in style. There was a bit more slow cinema involved here, where it was a progression through the plot. Here, this feels more like he was inspired by filmmakers like Godard and the French New Wave, where we're playing around with the formula. We're being a little bit more loosey goosey with where we're going to go here, and we got the plot here, but we've also got all these little misadventures going on at the same time, and it's kind of similar. It reminded me of the Pierrot Le Fou. When we watched earlier.
Yes, a lot of people say it's kind of like dabbles in that kind of French New Wave era, and obviously very much an inspiration for Mambéty himself. And I think coined as the first avant-garde African film.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. You're right. I read that quote myself earlier on, and yeah, it's interesting that it's 1973. That feels so late to have an experimental film. In the West we had so much of this since then, and I think that knowledge of like how late they are to the party only serves the story even more. How they're always looking at the West, or in this instance France, as this beacon to aspire to, and and perhaps maybe it isn't. At the end of the film, when they eventually board the boat to go, we overhear the conversations from the first white people that we see this whole movie, that are speaking to they're French people speaking together, and they're kind of turning their noses down at the Senegalese culture. What good would I do here? All I would do is pick up a couple of masks as a souvenir. They don't appreciate what it's like to work. All this sort of general caricature rich people talk, looking down on their noses. And yeah, it just kind of serves the movie, and it makes it even more poignant. I love the soundtrack from the beginning with those native flutes and those like chaotic noises, but especially that repetitive use of Josephine Baker's Paris, Paris, Paris.
Paris,
I know.
Paris, Paris.
Yeah, I which is very French, idyllic piece of music that states that Paris is like a heaven to live in. And it's used very often, and usually when the two of them are riding on Maury's motorcycle towards the camera, and you usually have a very angular, very dusty, tactile background, juxtaposed with this music. And it just really supports the naive and simplistic optimism that these two have for what France has in store for them. I'm going to struggle to get purry out of my head
Yes,
for days and days and days.
I have been in a very kind of similar state where I just every now and then I kind of hum to myself, Patty, Patty, Patty. But it is great. It is
very cool.
It is,
works
and
really
it kind of like if you hadn't realized already, it just kind of sums up their whole kind of motivation for every scene and kind of their kind of idyllic thoughts of what kind of Paris awaits for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in this film, and like you said, it is really colorful. There's kind of like some wacky hijinks that go on. My biggest issue with this film was I just felt the whole film was kind of drawn out a lot, and I feel like and it wasn't particularly slow paced, though at times it definitely was. I just felt like everything just kind of lingered for a little bit too long, and although you definitely wouldn't have got nearly as many people seeing it, but I just felt that like this whole thing would have worked better. What we saw on this film would have worked better as a short film. Now, obviously, if there was more kind of things to fill those gaps where I felt potentially it just kind of was really drawn out, then maybe that warrants a feature. But I don't know. It was difficult, and it's one of those films because it evokes so much kind of experimental new wave techniques. I wasn't always 100% sure what was happening, and there might be a bunch of different reasons for that. I might just be stupid, and there's a language barrier and a cultural barrier and all that kind of stuff. But I struggled. I struggled to just continuously stay kind of within the world of this film.
I completely understand where you're coming from, to be honest there. I felt that as soon as I finished the film, you do a little bit of reading like you do every film that you watch it, that you're mildly at least interested in. And the consensus online seemed to be, where people who were talking about this film, was that it was a comedy in a matter of ways. And I get that. I watched the film kind of thinking that he was going for some moments and pops at comedy, but I feel like, I don't know if it was a language barrier too, but I feel like they were often misjudged. I don't know about you. I could see with the taxi driver and flailing his arms and being over the top, but I don't know if it was the fact that a lot of these people, apart from our two main characters, are not naturally actors, that some of these moments just didn't come off as sharp as expected to. The pacing just seemed off with the humor there a little bit.
Yes, it's kind of wacky in places, but I think that it kind of works with that whole juxtaposition of like we're having these wacky hijinks where Maury is stealing the clothes of a kind of very flamboyant neighbor or person who lives up the road from him, whilst he's trying to kind of woo him into the shower and stuff like that.
Well, that's the other big negative I have of the film, really.
Go on.
I didn't love that this is Uncle Charlie, this character.
Yes.
It's a pretty significant part of the story where Maury and Aunt Rob, like you said, this really rich guy, that they know and also happens to be gay. But I would argue that this representation of homosexuality, albeit being in the 70s, is pretty negative one.
Yes.
He's sort of played off as a comedic character who's a bit of a clown, is sexually predatorial towards Maury, like he knows. But coming from a modern lens, this one seemed to be like a stereotypical representation, a trope used in sort of Western cinema. Actually, like, the rich gay uncle that is, he'll get us what he wants, but he'll also try to hit on you as well. I just felt like, it was a weird stab at humor that feels very much of its time, and a little bit like trying to say that maybe gay people are icky, which is terrible.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't overly. I felt a little bit awkward watching those scenes.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, to be honest, I was surprised to see some form of representation.
I'm surprised too. Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have been. But yeah, I mean, and to be honest, like there was even talks of kind of and to wearing trousers and not kind of fitting in within that society as well. So it was kind of about outsiders, but you're right. The gay character does kind of lean more into caricature and kind of negative. So it's interesting. But again, it is interesting that this scene is quite a comedic scene, and then later on you cut to a cow being killed and all that kind of stuff. And it's the film is strange in that way, but that also works for it. I just think overall not my favorite of the series we've been doing so far.
That's fine. I liked it a little bit more than you. Overall, really glad that I managed to catch this on the Sight and Sound list and be reminded that African cinema is definitely something not to be slept on.
Yeah.
But as said before, please, to everybody listening, please be warned that opening 15 minutes is not for the faint of heart. And although we've pre-warned you, it will still catch you off guard, as it did me. This is like, the NSFW section of Reddit. It's kind of like that. So if you don't work in an abattoir, then you might not be desensitized to sort of material. But it definitely, usually I'm such an animal lover that would have me tapped out pretty early on. It was really hard for a movie to earn my respect after that. So, it worked within the themes. And also I kind of was mature enough to realize that, these animals weren't destined for this world, if the camera was in front of them or not.
There's also an element of like, this is what happens. It's
usually, yes, of course. Cinema needs to be an accurate mirror of what happens in real life. Within reason.
And this is probably one of the reasons that Scorsese wanted to kind of restore this film to its kind of former glory. Is the fact that, it is showing a lot of kind of like day-to-day life within Senegal, within the 70s, that you kind of wouldn't have been privy to otherwise. But also, like, seeing those scenes, it's difficult. I guess if you're watching a documentary, it's different. But because you kind of are expected maybe to kind of see something as real and visceral as that. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to know where your food comes from, especially if you're a meat eater. It's difficult to shy away too much when, you make the choice. So,
and some of the best cinema provoke. Yeah, and some of the best cinema provokes as well. That's what has lasting power. And I think the thing that works in his favor here is that the Senegalese government provided him with the budget of like $30,000, which is very, very small. And I think that only helped the project a little bit more. We have a lot of extras or background characters in here. Well, not characters. I think they're just mostly members of the public in Senegal, So you're really getting this realistic flavor of what the country looks like. Whether it's the slums in the back streets or whether it's in the rural areas or in the inner city, you're really seeing those locations, and the people you're seeing walking around are sometimes they're reacting to the camera. It was similar to Celine and Julie Go Boating, where, people are just looking at the camera going, what is this? What's going on here? There's a little bit of element of that too, but it only really helps aid in getting that documentarian style to some of the scenes as well. So I sometimes money isn't everything.
Yes. Yeah. No, I get that.
But yeah, definitely worth catching up on. It is worth saying it's only 80 minutes long, although Alex still thinks it was too long.
I did. I regret to say, but yeah, I did think it was too long, personally.
But now your new favorite, most played song on Spotify is Paris, Paris, Paris.
Yeah, definitely left a lasting effect on me, that's for sure.
Added to the summer playlist.
Cool. Well, that is the podcast for this week. 2 films I think I personally soft recommend. Chris, I think you just are a normal recommend on both, probably, right?
Soft recommend on Master Gardener, a pretty positive recommend on Touki Bouki.
There you go. So take Chris's word for it. Don't take any of our words for it. Who knows? You should make up your own decision. This is why film is great. You have your own opinion. But then you come and listen to us. But if you don't just want to listen to us, you can also follow us on TikTok and Instagram. And that's pretty much it at the moment. And obviously, you can listen to us on whatever you're listening on now. Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, Amazon, whatever you want. But yeah, that is the film angle for this week. Next week, we'll be back, and I think the goal is to talk about Past Lives, which comes out in the UK.
Really excited to talk to you about that, because I've already seen it.
Yes, you saw a little advanced screening. Yes, we know. Okay. So I'm going to go watch that next week. Really looking forward to seeing that. And then we're also going to catch up, hopefully, on the next blind spot, which would be The Third Man.
Mm-hmm, which is like a movie that was like one of the first things ever to go on a watch list that I ever made, starring Orson Welles, and I've still not seen it to this day. And it's so great to actually have something to force me to watch it. So I'm really looking forward to it.
One of the best things about doing this list. I agree. Yeah, really looking forward to that one. That has been the film angle for this week. I'm Alex.
And I'm Chris.
Goodbye and good night.
Goodbye.